Where am I going here today? We're talking about more this afternoon because when we're talking about understanding yourself relationally, for Jewish folks and Christian folks, we're also beginning to talk about what we mean by the divine image and being created in God's image. So I have a lot more to say about this and some of the false ways we define selfhood in our culture around things like, we're a hypercognitive culture. And therefore, in a hypercognitive culture, when we're losing some sense of confidence in our cognitive abilities and the good things that brings, like control of my environment, etc., there is that I'm losing myself. But if we understand our very identity, our selfhood, primarily in terms of relationality, dementia, it can take a lot of things away, but it does not remove my capacity to enjoy friendship or share relationships with others, with one exception: if my friends all disappear, I cannot enjoy a friendship with them. And the way we share time as friends will change. Again, that externalizing of memory. The community may hold someone in memory when that person's own memory has faded. All of us, no matter what our state of cognitive health, with those we are closest to, we remember things for each other. It's certainly a part of our marriage act. There are things I don't have to remember because Susan can be relied upon to remember them. There are many, many, many more things she doesn't have to remember because I remember them for her. She's the dreamer, the academic, right? And I'm like, you have to eat today, dear. Yes, ma'am.
Can you address what happens when violence is a part of advanced dementia? I mean, thank goodness it doesn't happen all the time, but I've known sometimes where anger and violence and pushing away is really the major characteristic.
Yeah. No, this is as good a time as any to speak to that. Would you say, Susan? The anger and the violence, I mean, we don't have one-size-fits-all answers to that, as we have no one-size-fits-all. As the saying has it, if you've met one person with dementia, you've met one person with one form of dementia, and I would add, on a certain day. Because within the progression of various dementias, some people become more deeply and truly the self we've always known, and with others there will be personality change, particularly with frontotemporal and some other forms of dementia. Less so in general with Alzheimer's disease. Certainly, I have known many folks in advanced dementia who have lost inhibition. Dr. Richard Taylor, the gentleman we talked about who wrote Alzheimer's from the Inside Out, begins all of his talks with a warning. He says, I'm a Southerner and I'm a Baptist. So when my first child was born, I promised my God and my wife I would never curse again. And I honored that promise until I got this effing Alzheimer's, and now I effing curse like an effing sailor, and I actually enjoy it. So if you're offended by this word, that word, you should leave now, because I have no control over that. I really don't. But that same part of my brain used to tell me I shouldn't cuss, also told me I shouldn't sing because I had a horrible voice. And now I sing all the time. And I don't care if it sounds bad. So it's kind of liberating. And we could go into a long thing on how disinhibition can awaken creativity. This last part, I think one of the most frequent questions I got asked when I left a senior pastor of a large church of privileged people, and I'm an intellectual, this and that, and I said, well, I'm now just spending time with people with advanced dementia. And why? I can see what they get out of it, but what do you get out of it? They cannot imagine that it really is a two-way street where I receive at least as much as I give. And I'm learning so much from my mentors. I often say that if I didn't spend at least a few hours a week with my friends with advanced dementia, I would lose entirely my ability to be in the present moment. because I was never very good at that in the past. But when I'm with my friends with dementia, the present moment is all we have. And that is a rich gift in and of itself. The gift of joy and laughter I received. Once I had a dear friend, a geriatric psychiatrist, leave a secure memory care unit with this big grin on his face. I just love my friends with dementia. They have the best one-liners. And when you learn to receive the gifts as they are, rather than to be upset about what you thought you were looking for from them that they can no longer give you, but to see what your friend can still give you, that is powerful spiritual growth for us as we move along in that journey with them. Again, we'll be doing more with friendship in the afternoon. This is a physical thing we're going to do here. Miroslav Volf is a theologian. He's at Yale University, and most of his work is on the theme of forgiveness and reconciliation. And if you knew his story, he was born in Croatia. He had to learn a lot about forgiveness and reconciliation. But we found one of his images very, very helpful in terms of thinking about how we are present to anyone in our life in friendship, and especially our friends with dementia. So I'm going to ask those who are able and willing, could you do this one on your feet with me? As Miroslav argues that an embrace, whether we're talking a physical hug kind of embrace or a metaphorical embrace, which can be done with speech or many other things, however we are really embracing another person, is a drama that has 4 acts. So act 1, do it with me, you got to open your arms, right? Now again, if this is speech, it could be a word of greeting or something. But if you're going to hug somebody, you usually start this way, right? Mm-hmm. But Miroslav's wonderful observation is that in opening the arms to receive the other, you are necessarily pushing back the self, because the self that is full of itself cannot make room for the other. Isn't that nice? To open your arms is to push yourself back. It says, then there's a second step that we too often forget. Wait. Wait. One never assumes the right to embrace. Now, if we're talking about someone with significant dementia, you don't have to keep over. I'm just happy to see you on your feet because I might just anybody who interacts a lot with folks with dementia, particularly advanced dementia, knows there are a lot of don'ts. You don't come up behind someone, right? Yeah. And then speak, startle them, make them anxious. You make eye contact, all these rest of these things. But you have experienced that most folks with dementia are eager for physical touch and comfort. However, that does not give you the right to hug without permission, because even though they may often be eager for touch, for a hug, maybe not right now, maybe not from you right now. And one of my most advanced residents, wonderful woman, young onset, diagnosed around the age of 40, very severe dementia, pretty much aphasic. She's had some bad experiences with men in her life. I have maybe hugged her twice in a year and a half at her initiative. Okay? And that doesn't mean I can do it again the next day because she hugged me yesterday. So I wait for some sign. It could be very subtle. I say, hey, Gordy! And, I know Gordy very well. He may not open his arms, but he may give me a Gordy indication. Hey, yeah, whatever. And only then can I close my arms. No, we're now in embrace, right? And Miroslav points out that almost never is an embrace 50-50. No matter how much you love the person, you're never equally there at a given moment. Could be 55-45, could be 80-20, but you are both entering into the embrace willingly. You are sharing that space together. And of course, the necessary 4th act, you open your arms again. You're not there to control, to assimilate. You can sit down again, that's good. I just thought it'd be good for you. But then beautifully, Miroslav says, but once we have shared that embrace, and again, it could be verbal, but we've had this really good little mini conversation. We have left a portion of ourself in the keeping of the other, and have created a common space that we may choose to enter into together once again. And you know, it's helpful in thinking in all of our relationships. I love that 4-part drama, because there are people in this world who just don't understand the weight part. The bear huggers of the world, and that's assault is the other name for that, right? But with dementia, which for many folks is a journey from living in a primarily cognitive framework to an emotional framework, the small things, how we approach, how we touch, matter a great deal. And these are sort of things we're trying to teach and we think should be taught in congregations too. How do I continue the journey of friendship when my friend no longer remembers the story of our friendship? It's learning new ways to appreciate the friendship and new ways to be present to the friend. And, you know, real basic stuff in communication strategies. You all don't need to run through these things. Slow down, patience, call the person by name, introduce yourself. The folks, well-intentioned folks, but uneducated folks, when they finally work up the courage to go to see someone they know with dementia, think it's their job to pull them back from dementia, to fix it. So the typical greeting, you know, would be always in an overly loud voice, the assumption that dementia causes deafness. Hi, Bev! And then this horrible question Susan alluded to. Do you know who I am? No, but now I'm scared of you. What is it about our ego that is so invested in someone remembering our name or hooking up our face with that name? Why does it threaten us so much or make us feel so diminished when we are not recognized in that sense of recognition? And why do we ask that question of people who go to visit your mom? Does she know who you are? That's not a helpful question. It's not a supportive question. And Susan and I have argued that the heart knows those it loves, even when cognitive self no longer does. And we could tell many stories on that guard. But you know, don't start by asking, you know who I am. What did you have for breakfast? Why should you care? You know, just, why should you care? Why should you care? As a friend, you're to enter the space in which they live, not to take on the impossible task of trying to change a reality that simply is. So you introduce yourself. Hey, Bev, it's John, your friend. You look good today. Is this an okay time to visit? No? We should practice that sort of thing more with other friends, but that's dementia can teach us how to be a friend. Be aware of distractions in the environment, obvious stuff like that. Pay a lot of attention to body language, because often that's the most honest and meaningful communication that you're going to be receiving, and also that you're going to be giving. You know, if you're trying to put on your smiley face and you're anxious, you aren't going to get away with that. Many of you know that folks with Alzheimer's disease in particular seem to develop a built-in BS detector. You can't hide anything, any emotion. And particularly caregivers, CNAs know that. You put on your game face and say, "I've been to our cares, Mrs. Smith." And if you come from a bad place and you're like, "Mrs. Smith's going to know it," and the cares will not go well. Comfort and reassurance, the gifts again we should all be offering each other, and to be willing to enter the dementia zone of non-linear but meaningful communication. To go with that flow. As I mentioned in my pamphlet, no, you won't be discussing the great affairs of the world, but you can go home and read your newspaper. You're there to be in the moment with your friend and let the conversation go where it will, and find the pleasure of any conversation with a friend is not the profound topics you discuss, but the emotional connection that is forged in discussing them. And we can have that with our friend with dementia. Not all the time, not every visit, not every day. But again, what friend do you have who's always a pleasure or easy to be with. Not me, certainly. There are days you want to just leave me alone. And I find that with my friends with dementia. And sometimes, because time flows differently, 20 minutes later could be entirely different. But it's just enter into the communication that's meaningful because it's happening emotion to emotion rather than you're discussing nuclear physics. And receiving the gifts our friends can offer, certainly a new experience of time. We write a lot in our book about that the Greeks have two ways of talking about time, chronos and kairos. You religious folks, you know that. Chronos being the linear movement of time, the clocks, the schedules, the calendars that rule our lives. But kairos is just the fullness of the present moment. And we argue that all real encounters of friendship mean leaving chronos time and entering kairos time. For many of our friends with dementia, kairos is the only time they've got. And you need to enter into that and just say, here's this moment. We're going to make it good together. And move through things. Playfulness and laughter, these are the gifts that you have to give and receive in return. And if you are not filtering the friendship through your own wall of fear and anxiety, I've argued that the essential difference between congenital disability and dementia, which is also a disability, is that I may look upon the person born with Down syndrome or cerebral palsy or what have you, and the distancing is that poor person, that might have been me. But when I'm encountering the person with dementia, 50-50 chance about that will someday be me, which is scary. So if we can move through the filter of that fear and say, that might be me. Let me try to imagine life being good in this state by helping to make it good in this state. And therefore, learning the things that are of ultimate worth or value. What are the things that cannot be taken away from me? And again, I'll touch on that quite a bit more this afternoon. But one thing we certainly have to share with our friend is that our friend may no longer remember many of the things that brought him or her freedom from anxiety or joy. And as a long-term friend, we do remember. We picked up this term from a friend, a geriatrician, who talked about speaking of her own marriage. She says, Jerry and I know that if we're both privileged to live long enough, one of us will probably become the other's care partner, caregiver. And we don't get to pick which one of us that is. We each secretly think that we should be the caregiver and the other should be the caregiver, but we don't get to choose that. And that's why we all need a dementia toolbox. I want Jerry, and I want my children, and I want my closest friends to know all the things that calm me down when I'm agitated, and all the things that put me in my joy zone when I'm in a bad place. So, like, for example, I want to smell fresh peonies whenever possible. It's my favorite smell in the whole world. And so it just really soothes me. So Jerry knows that now. Whenever possible, fresh peonies in my room. And he already knows about this one, that I want to hear a baseball game on the radio whenever possible. He says, which is really strange because I don't like baseball. I don't even understand baseball. I just like the sound of the radio. He says, I think it's because when I was a little girl, my dad would be out in the front porch with the beer and the radio, and man, I understand too. And says, and I just like that sound, so I want to hear a baseball game whenever possible. He says, it could probably be the same game, and I wouldn't notice that. It doesn't matter, but it would calm me. And there's so many variations on that. To know someone over time is to have some sense of what will move them into joy and pleasure. And I'm sure you all can come up with many, many examples of that. I was doing chaplaincy in another our county skilled care facility, and one daughter of a mother with profound dementia and secure unit, came to me as chaplain because she felt guilty for deceiving her mother, because her mother's number one joy zone thing was receiving the gift of fresh flowers, the kind that come from the forest, wrapped in that paper, and she had this, no matter how deep the dementia was, for me? Oh, they're so beautiful. And the ritual of unwrapping them and putting them in the vase and adding the water, this just was, God and Jesus and Allah were all in the room. This is just incredible joy. And so she says, on the same visit, I give my mother the flowers 3 times. Her mother goes to the bathroom, wrap them up, and says, so I'm deceiving her. We should never have to apologize for the gift of joy, because we do have studies that show that positive emotion, joy, persists beyond the immediate experience. Unfortunately, so does sorrow. And indeed, studies have shown that sorrow persists longer. So the more we can do to help our friends with dementia move in that place that's free from anxiety, that is filled with joy, the more we are giving them a gift that will extend beyond the immediate time we are with them.
Before you move on, tell them the story that happened the other day when you wore your new shirt.
Oh, this is just so amazing. So I had a birthday earlier this month, and Susan gave me a very, very lovely shirt. I'm not a clothes person, so many, many years ago my mom dressed me, and now my wife dresses me. But I wore it for the first time because it was one of the nicer, I don't want to say spring days in Wisconsin, but it got into the 40s. And I was bright. And so I wore it to the nursing home, and I tend to dress very casually at the nursing home, because it helps when coffee gets thrown on me, and I spend a lot of time down on the floor. So I wear jeans. But I had this nice shirt on. And I've got a woman with very advanced dementia, incontinent, immobile, and largely unable to communicate with language. But when she can, she has amazing stories, because in a different life long ago, she lived in the East Coast, worked for the Kennedy family, and then for Senator Strom Thurmond. And she has some stories and secrets about the Kennedys that I never have been able to get out of her. But she is I don't want to say a dirty old woman, but she's a flirt, and we have a lot of jokes going about, you're not going to get me in trouble, are you, Marianne? No. And she immediately notices the new shirt, and communicated that, and then she wanted to give me kisses up and down the sleeve of my shirt. And this was a profound experience of joy for both of us. And I can't think of any friendship where I've taken more pleasure or given more pleasure in a short period of time than when Marianne was kissing up and down the sleeve of my new shirt. It was just wonderful. So that's what I'm trying to teach people, is it can still be good, it can still be real friendship. And all the rituals we have in that friendship, when I leave and she doesn't want to let me go ever, and I say, I'm going to be back, Marianne, and I'm going to be gone for a while. She can't process that, so you better behave. And she will get the language together and say, you behave. I say, no, you behave. And we do that for a while, and I says, you're stuck with me. You'll never get rid of me. You're just never going to get rid of me, Marianne. And she's, I love you. I love you. And within the deep dementia, that's a genuine expression of love. Because we moved into that place together where she can get to the core things that matter to her, and then she can communicate them. And that's just the wonder of what is still possible. So, here's just a finishing thing here. This is a good finish for the morning. The food's here, I see. So that's good. Group exercise here. This is fun. So Randy Cohen was for many years the columnist for the New York Times. There's this other coast of the country where they have this paper called the New York Times, and he was their ethicist and did a column called The Ethicist. And we're always kind of tracking how can friendships and social groupings, how are they going to need to evolve? So here, ladies and gentlemen, is a question posed to the ethicist. I will read it for you. Dear Mr. Cohen, for 25 years we have enjoyed a regular poker game. Tragically, oh dear, it's a tragedy, a longtime participant has been stricken, had jumped out from behind a bush and had struck him, right? We're talking about this language of warfare this afternoon. Tragically, a longtime participant had been stricken with Alzheimer's to the degree that the game is no longer enjoyable for the rest of us. We hoped he would decide not to play. We hoped he would disappear, right? Right? Or to join us just for the pre-game dinner. But he hasn't. That selfish SOB. He's still coming around. May we ask him or his wife if he would do so? Okay, one of the dilemmas of our time. Anyone, how would you, be honest now, how would you want to answer this man who sent the question? I'm going to get this going in case somebody wants to use it. But, okay. What would you say? Okay, legitimate dilemma in a sense, right? What would you say to him before we hear what the ethicists say? At one group we did, one woman said, well, my reply would begin, dear heartless, selfish bastard. I thought that was a good beginning.
So anybody want to say?
Anybody have a solution?
He just said it.
No, but that's just the form of address. But what should he do? What should he do?
Let him continue to play. I would let him continue to play. I mean, what harm is it?
Well, I mean, he is saying that the game is no longer particularly enjoyable for everyone else because poker unfolds in both Chronos and Kairos time, doesn't it? Right? Kairos, because you're all sharing this moment apart from the world together, but Chronos, it's time to, up the ante. Yeah, let's give it a try first.
I was just thinking, my uncle was diagnosed with Lewy bodies. That's what he ended up dying of. And we had a family tradition of playing games, and it may very well have been poker. And while we were playing it, we didn't know what was wrong with my uncle, just that he was beginning to have memory problems. My husband played for him. He sat next to him, and when it was his turn, the two of them discussed what would be the right move to make. And we all got a big kick out of it, and he was able to participate for a long time afterwards.
He had a poker care partner.
Yes, he did. Yes, he did. But it developed very naturally. It wasn't anything we all had decided. It
evolved out of family and friendship.
Yes.
You found a solution together that worked for everyone.
Yes.
All right. That's excellent. That's maybe the single best answer I've ever heard.
I agree. I like your answer.
Because I complimented it.
No, yeah, well, that helps too. What I would also suggest is that for them to be able to support their friend who still enjoys being with them socially and playing the game, to allow him to come and play the game with them and whatever ability he has to play that game and support him and enjoy that aspect of being with him. Then as a group, if they would like to, they could join another time when he would not be there for them to play the game like they would like to play the game. So they would accomplish both. They'd be able to support him as well as enjoy the game amongst themselves.
Right.
Okay.
Somebody else?
Somebody else? We covered it here. Because we'll hear what the ethicist says.
Yeah, well, we're going to tell you what he's...
This is going to be an increasingly common question in its many forms. Right, we already have the... Yeah, go ahead, Carol.
I find this very funny because my husband, who's a psychologist, has played poker for 25 years with the same group, and they're all in their 70s and 80s. And I think it would depend on whether the group was a group of women playing poker or a group of men. Because he still makes fun of me when he came upon a group of my friends. We were playing poker, and we were saying, "Oh, you've run out of chips. Let me give you some." Right. And he cannot possibly see a different tack. So I'm guessing depending on the ability to give up that need to win the game, I would go with Bev's answer if they could do that. But I think my husband's group would have to have a separate poker game.
Okay.
I think so too. Unfortunately,
Carol is introducing gender differences and then also letting us know that she married a much older man.
Oh, you're so funny.
I was a pastor, you know.
Anybody else? Okay.
Oh,
No?
and I was going to say, you know, questions in this realm are going to become increasingly frequent and common because we know that in social settings like couple settings, many of us, when we are widowed, suddenly find ourselves at awkward, you know, third wheel or fifth wheel or whatever wheel it is, and some groups can adjust, some cannot. But now this cognitive thing is going to be affecting groups of friendships. And the default thing, and this is what I find distressing about his letter, we had hoped he would essentially disappear, right? Isn't that what's being asked for? Because he can't keep up with us. And we value the kind of cutthroat give and take of it, and we can't do that with him anymore. So we'll hear what the ethicist says, and we can critique him. You are, of course, entitled to your bi-weekly poker game. I believe that's in the Constitution. And you admirably, he's giving the guy too much credit, seek to reconcile that right with the duties of friendship, among which kindness is paramount. Begin by talking to your friend's wife. Who is missing from that sentence?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, just, you know, as we think increasingly of dementia as a disability, and we're grabbing the phrase from the disability rights movement, nothing about us without us, the idea of this is just like, you know, ignoring the person with dementia and talking to the child or the spouse. Physicians do that, right? Yeah. Your husband has dementia. Well, how about you? I'm the husband. Hello there. Because particularly in the early stage, folks are well aware. Where were the friends when the issue was first surfacing, holding that kind of honest conversation friends should have? To say, Fred, you know, I'm sure you're aware because we're noticing it, that you're having some memory problems and they're affecting how you play the game. What can we change to make it work well for you and for everybody else? But there's too much cowardice. You know, this is, again, it's so dang American that we privatize and individualize and say, well, it's not my role. And we're just too awkward to do it here. See, she is surely aware of his condition. Duh! You know, if guys who play poker with him every other week are aware of it, maybe his wife hasn't noticed yet. Right. She might like the idea of his joining you for dinner but skipping the game. Perhaps she will suggest other ways, and here's the phrase we like, to reconfigure your gatherings, and how most gently to let your friend know of your plans and your affection for him. I think it's something we're all going to be called to do in creative, loving ways. Find ways to, again, the phrase, reconfigure our gatherings, to recognize the realities so that if one member of our social set begins the journey into memory loss or cognitive diminishment, we don't abandon our shared community of friendship, but find new ways. You know, among creative suggestions is, so these guys only know how to play poker together? Could they ever figure out how to go to a museum together or do other things to share each other's company in which the fellow with the limitations would not have that effect? That friends need to learn to make changes so that the friendship and the community continues to be viable for everyone. But the default position is, this is what we do, he can't do it anymore, he's gone.